Hi, Zizaran here with a special YouTube video, and I'm being joined today by MrLlama SC, and we are going to talk about Diablo 2 Resurrected, and we're going to do like a light Q&A, and we're going to do some tips and tricks for people, and obviously focus especially on tips and tricks for Path of Exile players that are trying to play Diablo 2 Resurrected, whether you have played it before or not. There's going to be a lot of useful stuff in this video here today. Thank you so much for joining me, MrLlama. You must be really excited with the upcoming Diablo 2 Resurrected.
Oh, of course. Happy to be here. And yeah, I mean, I've been looking forward to Diablo 2 Resurrected for so many years before it even came alive. Every year I was praying that it was actually going to be a thing. So finally going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting. And it starts on the 23rd. What's the actual time that it starts?
8 a.m. Pacific time.
8 a.m. Pacific time. That sounds like a great time for me. And speaking of PoE, it's a very different game than Path of Exile. We're going to be covering that in this video as well. We want to start off by talking about what probably most people are going to be wondering, and what would be the top 3 easiest beginner builds.
The 3 easiest builds, I would say, one, the Necromancer class, either a Bone Necro or a Summon Necro, are going to be pretty easy. They don't have the biggest damage, but from a survivability standpoint, you have all of the curses, your summons, Bone Prison, all of these different things to just like crowd control the entire map. So it's very easy to just keep everything wherever it is away from you, and then you just kind of slowly work your way through.
And do you have one of those that you can show us so we get to see it in action?
I've got a Poison Necro, but he runs.
He runs.
Summons. So he actually has summons, so I can grab some from him.
And for those wondering, what we're seeing right now is like old Diablo 2. This is not Diablo 2 Resurrected. That is going to have a lot better graphics, and it will be different in some ways to what you're seeing here. But obviously, Diablo 2 Resurrected isn't currently playable. We can't show live footage from that right now.
This is, like I say, this is a Poison Necromancer, but you can see he also is a summon mix. And I can literally just sit here with my hands off, right? I can like teleport and then just take my hands off, and all of my summons will flock over and kill everything. And so, yeah, you can, you know, cast curses and do all that stuff, but it's not like a build that you're having to be so crazy on and whatever. So I think this plays very well for someone who's newer to the game, and maybe is a little bit worried about, you know, not being able to react as quickly and do all that stuff. You can, you know, play a build that's more like this, and then a Bone Necro.
For all these, do you have like in-depth guides that we can link to in the description for people as well?
Yeah, I will have guides for all of these.
Perfect.
So for the Bone Necro, you have a similar idea. But one of the really useful things is Bone Prison right here. So let's say that I get in a place where there's a lot of monsters, right? I can actually just go like this and just spam up the entire screen with Bone Prisons. Wow. And once again, I'm just sitting here and I'm fine. And then whenever I want, I can cast my Bone Spears at the monsters.
That's very safe then.
Yeah. And so it's just nice and easy because once again, if you're ever in trouble, you can just run and do this and just prison everything. And then it kind of just stays where it is. So another really solid character that just has that same sort of idea for the Necromancer to just kind of really easily deal with the game. My next class that I would say is the Assassin, and it's going to be this Trapsin right here. Nice. With the Trapsin, she has so much crowd control. So again, with the kind of easy builds, one, it's a pretty easy skill tree. You're just like max, 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 and then like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So it's very easy to know like how you want to play it. But additionally, you have a lot of crowd control. So what I mean is you have one with Cloak of Shadows, where you can literally do Cloak of Shadows, and then they're gonna like stop coming after you.
Oh wow.
Pretty easy. And then additionally you have Mind Blast, which will knock them back, but then also has a chance to convert. So you can see they get that little swirl above their heads, and then that means that they're fighting for me. So then monsters will go and try and attack them instead of attacking, right? So you can just do that, and while you do that, you can set up your traps, let your traps kill everything.
Right.
And so again, you know, it's that same sort of idea where you have that safety, and that just allows your character to be so much stronger, so much better. She also has a very high life pool overall for a character. She has good life gain per vitality point. Really just a solid character overall. And then lastly, top 3, I mean, I could say Paladin, because Paladin has some decent stuff, but I feel like you are going to be a little bit closer. I'll go with Sorceress. So with the Sorceress, I know a lot of people want to play a Sorceress. She's not the easiest character overall. Having like Blizzard definitely helps, because you're going to be able to, and those are cold immune, so bad area to give an example. But you're going to be able to drop a Blizzard down on top of mobs and kind of slow them through cold damage, which is very helpful. So that's kind of like a big added benefit, right? As you get the cold damage, you also get a lot of damage.
Wow.
And then you do get the ability to teleport around, so that can really save you in a lot of bad situations. You can always put yourself at the back and keep kind of a nice distance between you and monsters. But Sorceresses are a little bit harder, because generally you're going to be running a single elemental spec, maybe a dual one, but then you lose some damage. And there are immunities in this game, which we can talk about, you know, in a little bit, but that's something that will make it a little bit more difficult.
And speaking of immunities, and thank you for showing those builds. We'll be linking in the description down below to Llama's build guide, so that people will have some really solid starters. Let's talk about things like immunities. What are the big differences from Path of Exile that are going to be really like noticeable?
Yeah, so the first one for sure is going to be overall Diablo 2 moves at a lot slower pace.
Yeah.
It's just not that same game where you're bouncing around quite as much. I mean, I know you saw me teleporting a little bit, so there was a little bit of speed, but it still has a very different flow. And at the same time, like I said right there, you'll run into immunities. And so, you know, there's literally monsters, like if we go back to the Cold Plains, that are immune to cold. So if I drop blizzards, it just doesn't affect them. Like my mercenary has to kill these guys, because my cold damage does 0 damage to them.
So there's no way around that generally, right? Until super endgame, where you can get an item, for example, called Infinity, that will lower res.
So,
but for most characters, you just cannot get around immunities, and you either want to do multiple damage types, or you can't fight that thing.
Yeah, and at the same time, even with Infinity, you're not always going to break cold immunities.
Oh.
So like here you can see I have Infinity, and it is going to break these guys. Okay. I'd have to go find. Let me see.
So is cold immune the hardest to break then?
Cold immune is the hardest to break. So you won't always break immunities with lower resist or with conviction aura, which comes from the Infinity weapon.
Yeah.
So even then, cold is the hardest to break, then fire, and then light is the easiest. But yeah, it kind of comes down to like end game. You can just run dual spec stuff. You can have a merc that's just strong enough to kill the guys on his own, where you don't have to deal the damage. Or you can get something like Infinity. But yeah, along the way, it's going to be a lot more difficult with that. You'll have to kind of bounce and avoid some monsters more often.
Yeah.
And that's going to generally be the way to fight them. Either play with a party, or just kind of go past them, run away from them, you know, stun them and go around, use Cloak of Shadows, like all of that stuff.
Yeah, party play is definitely a very, very big incentive because of immunities. Next up, I would love, I don't know if we're able to, but being able to show people amp and talk a little bit about amp would be really cool.
So amplified damage is, and it increases the damage taken by 100%. This is physical damage. So monsters that are cursed, if there's a unique monster, let's see if we can. So I now have this amplified damage curse on me, and when I get hit by a mob, they'll actually do twice as much physical damage, which is super deadly. And this is just such a like easy way to die if you have this curse on your head. So when you see a monster like that who has cursed, generally it's like go to town, talk to Mala, talk to the healer, get it off your head, and then go back out. especially in hardcore. You
So
never
for
want to play with
reference,
the
my
endgame.
last 3 deaths in D2 were all while amped, and
Yeah.
it was generally while teleporting, so I didn't
Yep.
have a good chance to like go back to town. But generally now, like if I get amped, I leave. I go back to town.
Yeah. So that's a big thing. Also, being frozen is a big thing. So a lot of characters are going to run some sort of piece of gear. I don't think I have one on here, but we can go.
Living dangerously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't really need it on a caster, but any
Yeah.
melee character is going to have something that has cannot be frozen. So there you can see at the bottom, cannot be frozen. At the bottom, cannot be frozen. A rhyme shield is going to have cannot be frozen. Like, you're going to have to pick up some piece like this. And the most common one is Ravenfrost. This is your most common form of how characters will pick it up, because this is also just like a best in slot item for a lot of builds,
Right.
and not too rare. So you need some sort of cannot be frozen. Let's say I'm running on this character, and this is my like fight. He's very speedy, so
Right.
his whole purpose is to run around really quickly. And then I take off my Ravenfrost. There we go. There's a cold enchant. Hit me. There we go. So
Wow.
it really like makes the character so much worse, right? Like, it's just like so painful, as opposed to if you're able to go without being frozen. And this is a character that's like very end game, so we're gonna be okay with it.
Yeah.
But for a lot of characters, they're gonna be absolute garbage if you're a melee character playing through the game and you get frozen. So having some source of cannot be frozen is just like massively important, and definitely highly suggested for any build, any melee build whatsoever, or just build that, you know, uses attack speed, bows as well, right? Anything like that. But casters don't need it as much because it doesn't affect the casting speed.
Oh, right. That's interesting. I didn't know that. And a big difference from newer ARPGs and coming back to Diablo 2 Resurrected is that there isn't as much of an end game. Can you tell us a little bit about the end game and what to do there in D2R?
Yeah, so Diablo 2 never was this game where, you know, you rush through the game to get to the real game, right? Like, that's kind of the thing. The campaign and a lot of, you know, D3, Path of Exile, whatever, it's like, you just kind of like be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo 2, like, playing the game and playing through the stuff within that game is a lot more. That's kind of everything that you have. So you technically have a couple endgame things. You have Ubers, and then you have like Dclone, which is kind of its own separate thing.
What are Ubers and Dclone for those that don't know that?
So Ubers are the end game additional content area. Basically, after you've beaten the game, you can go collect these keys from killing certain bosses in the campaign. The Countess, Nilithak, and the Summoner. They have a chance to drop keys. You morph all the keys together, and you can go fight Uber Duriel, Uber Lilith, and Uber Isuel. And then you collect the organs from those guys, morph them together, and to Tristram, Uber Tristram, which has Uber Mephisto, Pandemonium, Diablo, and Uber Baal all in it, and they spawn minions and all this stuff, and it's kind of this like really cool fun fight, and if you kill it, then you get a nice charm. Yeah, most of the campaign overall is just the game, and so you fight, you know, Hell Mephisto while you're playing through the game, but then again you'll come back and kill Hell Mephisto hundreds of times, thousands of times, whatever it is, because that's like one of the best places to get some good loot while you're in, you know, trying to like get some good stuff to gear up your characters and things. And so you're gonna do that. You're gonna do Curus runs where you're looking for gems and charms and jewels and jewelry and all that stuff. You'll do plenty of Chaos and Baal runs, which is, you know, the later stages to like get your experience up.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what you do in the game. You just kind of play the game over. Of course, there's also PvP, and you know, you're gonna be doing some stuff with trading and all of that, right? It's kind of more players created their own end game for the game.
You did mention D2 clone as well, which I remember when I played, you had to sell Stone of Jordans, and I remember doing something with command prompt and netstat or something to figure out if I was on the right server. Is that going to be the same, or how is D2Clone going to be in D2R?
So it's going to be the same. It's probably a little bit different in how it's configured with like the backend stuff, but it's going to on our side look the same basically. I don't know if we'll be able to determine the hot IPs and all that stuff the same way and whatever it was like we did before.
Yeah.
But they're also bringing it to single player where you just have to sell one SOJ in single player and then it'll spawn him.
Wow.
Which seems more fair than, you know, making somebody in single player sell 75 SOJs.
That seems very reasonable.
Yeah, so I think that's a cool little addition.
And how much harder than like Hell Diablo would Diablo Clone be?
He's definitely more hard, or just definitely harder, I should say. He has really one of the biggest issues is his regen is pretty high,
right.
And so you're gonna want some sort of prevent monster heal hit on him. From something that you're carrying, or a mercenary to have poison damage or something to keep his regen down. Otherwise, he'll just kind of out regen you. Right. But ultimately, if you do get like a really up smite or you know, charge strike or lightning fury, whatever, you know, Javazon, that eventually you can out damage him and just kill him on your own. But for somebody who's like a level 80 and they're under geared on some sorcerers or something, they'll probably have a lot of trouble with them, honestly.
You did talk a little bit about doing things like Mephisto runs and stuff like that on farming gear. And I would quite like to talk a little bit about gear in Diablo, because obviously we have some ARPGs where uniques are the end all be all. Talk me a little bit through like the progression of gear, like uniques, set items, and rares. When do you use which and why?
So gear is beautiful in Diablo 2 because everything kind of has a time and place, with the exception of a lot of sets, unfortunately. I mean, there's still a lot of like set items that do exist, but overall you can have best in slot magic items, best in slot rares, best in slot, you know, sets, uniques, like all sort of that stuff, crafts, just kind of depending on what the character is, what the gear is, where you're at, all of that stuff. So it's really, really nice. It's something that I really love. I've made a bunch of tier lists actually of like all of the uniques and everything for the weapons, or for the like javelins, for the, you know, armor sets, for just all the different things, because it's good to know like, okay, shaft stop is nice. It's not going to be like that best in slot, but it could be good for a mercenary, and in a hardcore that could be really nice for him. Yeah. You know, I mean, just like that sort of stuff. I just love the gearing because it really just flows all together, and there's no like you should always drop a rare for a set or for a unique. That's never the case. Everything is look at it and determine like what affixes better suit your character, what do you need more, and then you kind of roll from there, you know.
Yeah, that's very cool. So it's not always like, I mean, obviously I'm sure there will be some pieces that will be best in slot, but from what I understand, like rares are still like very important in gearing.
Yeah, for sure. They're even more important in classic. LOD, I feel like some rares are important. Generally, you're going to use more things in those places. So, you know, if you would have used a rare armor, now it's like, oh, I'd rather just put a smoke rune word on or something like that. Right.
That makes sense.
But there's still plenty of rares that are very good. Boots and gloves and rings and that you'll use all the time.
And Rune Words, just to cover that real quick, if you are completely unfamiliar with Diablo, you'll basically find runes like around the world, and if you can show one, that'd be sick. Yeah. And here we have a 3-socketed mage play, and this is one of the most like famous Diablo 2 Rune Words, Enigma, which gives you the teleport ability. So here you have to have a jaw, an ith, and a bear, and they are like case sensitive, so to say. You do have to put them in the correct order.
Yes.
And then it's basically create your own unique. You get to sort of choose what base it's going to be on. And some of the rune words will have different roles, which you like. There's nothing like a divine orb in Diablo. Like it's if you're making, for example, the spirit rune word, you are stuck with the stats that you get, and then you could try making a new one to get like a higher roll, which is really cool.
there's like my spirit. Yeah, so like right here, Talthal or Am, this is in a broadsword. You could also have put this in this phase blade or in the spirit sword or in a crystal sword or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It also goes in a shield because this rune word isn't unique to just weapons. It's also swords and shields. So, you know, this one has a couple different ideas to it. But yeah, if you're unsatisfied with some of the rolls, you can remove the runes with a hell rune. You don't get to keep them. It just wipes it all out. But you get the base back, which sometimes is worth more than the actual runes themselves. So that's kind of the funny thing.
Nice.
So
That's
for
very
instance,
cool.
like, you know, right here, the spirit right here, Talthal or Am are not worth a lot in the late game. Those are all pretty low runes. The monarch itself is worth more. So generally, if you get a bad roll and you want to try again, you just take this, dump the runes, get them trashed, and then you put another Talthal or Am in and keep going until you get, you know, whatever it is that you were looking for.
Speaking of gearing, resists in Path of Exile are basically mandatory, where the game expects you to be at least elemental resist cap 75 all, and you don't necessarily need chaos resist. But how is that in Diablo? When you first enter Nightmare or Hell, are you basically expected to be resist capped, or how dangerous is that?
No. Resistances are still very important. It's one of the most important affixes in Diablo 2. I don't think the capping is quite as important as in Path of Exile. Like I noticed, and if I was in Path of Exile, I had like 67% fire resist. I just go get like one shot smashed. You know, it was like every little like single percent off was just like brutal. Yeah. I don't feel like it's quite as brutal in Diablo 2 in that regard. Generally, I mean, yes, when you're like super late game, you'd love to run around. But like this is my resistances on this barbarian. And that's like good enough, right. You know? Like capping out the lightning and cold would be nice. But it's not end of the world.
Would you have some rough numbers of like first going into Nightmare, first going into Hell, how much resists do you need to have at least? Like, is it like, are we talking like minus 30 at the start, or are we talking you want like 10, 30 positive?
Yeah, so in normal you start at 0. In Nightmare you get a 30 res penalty, and in Hell you get a 100 penalty. So in normal you can run without many resistances for most of Act 1 and 2. The only resistance you're really going to need to care about early is a little bit of lightning for beetles. And then fire is what you'll really want for Act 3 and 4. And that'll be very helpful for you there. So I like to run at least like 40, 50 fire res by like Act 3 or 4, which is why I even will just do a Ral helm right here. Like I'll literally just grab 2 Ral runes off the Countess and just shove them in a helmet and just wear this around. Because fire resist ends up being really important in those acts. Otherwise, you can get burned down pretty fast.
Wow.
Cool. I would definitely say that like once you start going into Nightmare, resistances are going to be a little more important. I would want to have positive res somewhere between like 15 and, you know, max. But I don't ever feel like I need to be capped in Nightmare at all.
About the penalty in Hell, was that 100 plus the 30, or just like it goes to 100?
Yeah, just goes to 100. So if I can be positive in Hell, I'm pretty happy at the start. But as I gear up, you definitely want to get your res, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60%. Fire and lightning are going to be the most important ones.
And charms would probably be a good place to get that early, right?
Yeah, charms are a fantastic place. So I'm trying to think if I have any like what characters. I mean, getting, you know, charms that have 10 fire res, 9 fire res, 4 all res, you know, life and whatever stuff, 9 fire res. Like, you just want to kind of stack a lot of resistances in these ways because that's a great way to max them out, and it'll just help your character so much.
It's so crazy, like running around with an inventory full farming thing.
Oh yeah, it's pretty silly, but this is how your inventory will look end game. You literally, this is how I pick items up. So when I kill stuff, I grab it and I put it in my cube. Because, you know, it's like you can run without this stuff, but then you're missing out on all this like nice damage. And
it's crazy. For next out, I want to cover some early things to look out for. Like, what are some like early like socketed gear that would be generally good, or like some rune words that are really good early. Like
Yeah.
obviously stealth is a good one, right?
Yeah, so here's some of the like early things. You're gonna want to make a stealth. Every single character, it doesn't matter. This is like the best in slot, level 17 rune word. Or yeah, for pretty much every character. If you're a melee character and you find a twitch throw, this could be a nice like alternative, but stealth is like your thing. When you get like a little later, smoke can be really nice if you find a lum rune. Duress can be really nice for a melee character if you get an rune some point. Peace is really nice for like an Amazon. These are all really amazing armors that are like early mid-game armors you might find. Spirit Shroud, Duriel Shell, Q Hagen's Wisdom, and Skin of the Viper Magi. But that's even a little bit later. For melee characters, getting something like a Strength can be nice, just to have some crushing blow. Honor's a really good rune word for you. And then I even love just shoving like 3 Tau runes into a gem flail, or just a flail, and just get like big poison damage. And then Malice is also really nice for like an early melee character to start out with. Nice open wounds and some good damage. Obviously, Spirit Sword. Just a classic, super cheap, easy, amazing caster item. This is going to be massive for a lot of people, so a lot of people will want to get spirits early on. Belts, I mean, there's not a ton of stuff with belts. Night Smoke is nice. String of Ears is great with some damage reduce. Gold Wrap has some IAS and Magic Find on it. But honestly, shopping just a belt that's just like a big old belt with life on it is a great way to go early in the game. Helmets, you can put some tier runes in a helmet if you want to get some mana per kill. You can put some Rao runes for fire resist. Iratha's is a fantastic helmet. It gives you 30 light res, 30 fire res, and then this one has another Ral in it for just more resistance. Nadir is okay. It gives Cloak of Shadows charges though, which are nice. This is once again just like, I need res. Perfect. Get a 3 open socket helmet and just shove resistances into it. These are great early things to do. Tarnhelm is great. Lore is a really nice rune word. Ort Soul. This can be, you can get these runes from the Nightmare Countess. Gets you +1 to skills, some res, mana per kill, some energy. Peasant Crown is nice if you can find that. Rockstopper is a very great defensive armor helmet. And then just some random things like that. And then Ancient's Pledge and Rhyme Shield are going to be the 2 shields I recommend. This one I'd recommend for a caster. This one I'd recommend for any character that is going to melee and needs some Cannot Be Frozen.
Right.
So both of these are very nice. And you actually get the runes for Ancient's Pledge when you complete the Act 5 Quest 2. So if you save the barbs from the cages and you go back and talk to the guy, it gives you Ral or Tau rune. So you can just get a 3 open socket shield and put them in, and you're good to go.
Very nice.
Blood Fist are really nice early on. That's just like a super great one. And then something as simple as like Hisaris boots are really, really good. But you can even just like look for like faster unlock boots with big resistance on them. And that can be something really nice just to tide you over for a while.
Nice.
And then I also love like Natalia's boots. These come a little bit later, but they're really, really nice res and good run walk. So yeah, that's kind of just some like random early game stuff that can be decent.
And for like trading and stuff like that, how do people trade in Diablo? Is there like a trade site? Like how do you find items to sell?
You trade in game. I mean, there's going to be some people who use sites and things like that, but that's not the Diablo 2 experience. The Diablo 2 experience is you go in the game and you say, hey, what do you got? And they show you the things and you say, what do you want? And then they say, I want this. And then you kind of barter with each other and you trade there. So, I might literally go in and say, hey, I've got, I mean, nobody's going to want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a Crown of Ages and it's a really, really good roll. And they'll be like, oh, I really want that. What do you need? And I'll be like, well, I need, 3 Jaw runes to make my last wish. and they'll be like, okay, I'll give you that or whatever. You know, you just barter and go from there. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. You can look around for some generic kind of guides.
And there's also like bizarre games, right? Like trading games where people would just be like joining, telling people what they have, what they need.
Yep. There's so literally ones that'll just be called trade. You can just type trade into the game window at any point, and there'll be a game open where people are just standing around trading items.
Yeah. Another thing that obviously wasn't available for the original D2, if you were playing 20 years ago, but there's a lot of communities on Twitch as well, and I'm sure quite a lot of streamers probably wouldn't mind you looking around for items in the chat and asking if people want to play with you or trade with you. So
for sure. And you'll see it in Discords as well. I have like a trade chat in my Discord where people post stuff, and
nice.
Yeah, I mean there's always people trading everywhere. So
for the last part of the video, let's cover good leveling areas for each act. So if people feel like they're stuck and they want to level or farm a zone over and over again, and for people that want to like farm gear before progressing, especially if they're in hardcore and they don't want to die. We'll start with leveling areas.
Sure. So the leveling areas are going to be at the very start. People like to actually do Tristram runs. So in the Stony Field, when you save Cain, you get this little portal to Tristram, and people will literally just come down here and kill the boss group and kill the boss group, and then like kill the champion group here.
Yeah.
Clear out the minions, and they just kind of run around there. So a lot of people do that from like level 1 to level maybe 2 or 3 to like level like 13 or 14. That's kind of a common farming spot for groups. So you'll see Trist runs. Solo, doing the Countess in the Black Marsh is a great place. I don't know if I can find it, but basically you look for the tower and you can just run around, and there you go. And you just like kill all the boss groups in the tower. And then you also get runes at the end of it, which is really nice. But this is like a nice place to level up and
I've died here.
That stuff. Yeah. It's a little dangerous sometimes, but it's a good leveling spot. So those are the two Act 1 spots people are going to usually do. In Act 2, people will go through the tombs. So you have 7 tombs at the Canyon of the Magi. Starting from there, and they just kind of go around in a nice little shape. And so people will just go in here, kill the bosses in here, you know, whatever. And then when they finish killing those, they'll come out, and then they'll just go to the next one. So tomb runs are pretty common. You usually see those from like 15 to 20 or so, 21, 22 sometimes. We did a lot of these in the beta because this was kind of the end game content for it.
Yeah.
Then people like to do cows for the next level, next area. So that's, you get the leg from Wirt's leg when you're in Tristram, and then you can morph it once you've beaten Bale and normal. People like to do cows for like level 20 to 25, maybe a little higher. And then,
for returning players, you can kill the Cow King now, right?
Yes, you can kill the Cow King now. They've changed it. And then after that, people are probably going to just level up doing Bale runs. This is going to be your most common leveling. So they just go kill Bale, do the waves, and just keep doing the waves over and over again. And then in Nightmare, people will usually just kind of rush through Nightmare to try and get to the Bale runs in Nightmare. They'll usually do those to like level 70, 65, 70. Then they go through Hell, and people will level in the Chaos Sanctuary, which is at the end of the River of Flame, and then Bale waves right there. So that's pretty much usually where people go for leveling purposes.
And what about, say, I'm a fairly new player, I haven't played much D2, but I'm feeling like around Act 3 and 4 that my character's starting to fall off. Is there like any nice like leveling areas in Act 3 and 4 to try to get ahead of the content?
So I really like farming the Flare Jungle in Act 3. Flare Jungle, and then you can do like Lower Kurast, Kurast Bazaar. You can kill like the bosses in these temples. So you can go into the Fane, and then you can kill like these bosses. And that's generally where I would recommend. And then, like I say, I like the Flare Jungle because generally you just get like a bunch of little dudes all over the place, and they end up being pretty good experience. So I would say you can do that stuff for kind of leveling there. People don't really level in Act 4 except Act 4 Hell Chaos. maybe like a tiny bit in Nightmare Chaos if they wanted, but generally it's not like a leveling spot.
Right.
Very much. And then one of the best spots for single player is Eldritch, and this is a bad character for it because it's cold immune in hell.
Oh.
But you can just come over here. I'll use my fire skills. You can come over here and level just doing Eldritch. So this is like one of the best spots because you can just make another game, go here again, do that again, and then you can go back and you can farm Pindle as well.
Oh, and that's another thing worth mentioning, that in Diablo there is no like hold control to reset the instance. You have to make a new game.
Yes. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you have to go and make another game to kill them again.
Yeah.
But those are great like easy leveling spots for kind of single player there. End of every kind of difficulty, you get a nice Eldritch that you can farm, and Pindle's not bad.
And how different is this for like farming areas for gear? Like where would you go if you want to like specifically try to farm upgrades?
Yeah, so these are going to be your leveling areas. For gear, I mean, it's always good to just mass kill mobs if you want gear, but some of the better stuff is going to be like doing like a Mephisto run or an Endario run or whatever it is. So you're just going to want to kill some bosses.
And if you're in multiplayer, the map resets each time, right?
Yes, the map will reset. They won't be able to see it. But
Is there any way to reset it in single player?
What?
Is there any way to reset the map in single player?
With a mod, you can.
Huh.
But like there you can see like we just found a unique item. And so killing Mephisto over and over again and killing Endariel, who's the Act 1 boss. So you go Catacombs level 2 and you go through the Catacombs and kill her. Those are really going to be like year 2 premium farming spots for the gear that's going to be like, not that, but like Shaco, Tal's Belt, Water Walks, you know, Nagel Ring, Trangal's Bracers, like a lot of best in slot items. That's going to be like your best place to find it is Endariel or Mephisto. So you'll really kill for a lot of that stuff. And then when you found all that sort of gear, when you want to find like your Death Fathom, your Tal's Armor, kind of these like higher end pieces, that's where you'll have to go off and do more of like the chaos running or go do some of the specialized areas like the pit or ancient tunnels or anything like that.
Yeah. Could you show the pit and ancient tunnels and talk a little bit about them as well?
Sure. So these are area level 85s. So basically the way that the game works is every area has an area level, and you'll just have to kind of look it up because there's just a lot of them. But the highest area levels are area level 85, and that is going to be Ancient Tunnels, the Pit, Chaos Sanctuary, you know, like Throne of Destruction is going to be that. Like it's going to be your high-end areas, and then these miscellaneous areas kind of thrown in between, like this one, right? It's just like in the middle of the Lost City, but this is that. And so there's a lot of boss groups that are in here, and then what you'll note is that these boss groups can actually drop any item in the game because it's the highest level area. So that's what it's really useful for, is when you do want to find this sort of item, this is a very high level item. It's not going to drop from your basic monsters. Mephisto's not going to drop that.
Right.
Diablo's not going to drop that even, right? You have to come into like these zones right here and kill these sorts of monsters to get those items. So it's kind of a unique thing. So that's the tunnels right there. And then I'll go over really fast to the pit.
So what are the different immunities in the pit versus the other one?
So the pit's going to have cold immunes. You can see there's cold, right? There's a lot of cold immunes down here. Generally, if you're coming down here, you're going to be looking for lightning, or you're going to be a lightning character. That's going to be the best character for going around down here. Hey, Ethereal Bloodfist. Because otherwise it's just like too many cold immunes and stuff like that. And if you're going into the ancient tunnels, you're going to want to play a cold character, as there's no natural cold immunities down there. So those are going to be like 2 right there.
Llama, thank you so much for joining us here today, doing a Q&A about Diablo Resurrected, and
Of course.
so much information. And to everybody watching, make sure you check out MrLlama. He's amazing YouTube guides. I think, are you MrLlama SC on Twitter, YouTube, everything?
Everything, yep.
Everything. Awesome. Speedrunner for Doctors Without Brothers. Amazing guy. Really good content. Make sure you go check him out. And he will be able to cover all your needs for D2R.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Sis. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, dude. Anytime. I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have a blast.
So, again,
Absolute blast.
it's going to be so good, dude. So, everyone, thank you guys so much for watching. Sub if you like the video. But more importantly, try to die
Try to die
less than I
less
do.
than he does.
Got it.